So for that reason, we started defining your second career, and nothing could be more important this year as the world has changed so much because of the coronavirus. People are still joining the session, and we're going to be a large crowd this morning. So I'm going to ask everyone to follow all the standard Zoom protocols that we've all come to know so well over the past 7 or 8 months, which are, please keep yourself on mute if at all possible for you. If you need to ask a question or would like to ask a question, we would always welcome that, but we would politely ask that you do so by putting a note in the chat, and one or other of the hosts on this session, I'm one of them, and there are other Work Avenue people as well, we will notice your question and we will be able to pick that up and ask it an appropriate pause point in the session. We have a huge a load of sessions for you this morning, lasting throughout the morning until we close our event today at 1 o'clock with a Q&A to the whole Work Avenue team. You've all had the schedule, you all know what the sessions are going to be. And because we are virtual, we have an opportunity for everyone to be able to join whatever session they like without any restrictions or limits on the numbers of people in rooms or anything. So you see, this virtual activity actually has some benefits, more than we thought it might. You know, when we were doing events in person in those olden days before coronavirus took a hold of our world. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Debbie Sheldon, who's going to introduce the event formally to you. Debbie's our CEO of Work Avenue, and she's very delighted and proud to be able to be with us today and to introduce the event to us, and also our keynote speaker as well. So Debbie, over to you.
Thanks, Emma. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Defining Your Second Career, generously sponsored by Keith Breslaw and our friends at Patron Capital Partners. I'm Debbie Sheldon, CEO at Work Avenue, and I'm so delighted to welcome you today to our second Defining Your Second Career event, as Emma mentioned, which in keeping with lockdown rules is being run virtually. I'd like to tell you all a little bit about today's event and Work Avenue. Work Avenue was launched in 2006 with one single aim: to help people earn a living, either through creating employment or through growing a business. Work Avenue creates opportunities for everyone at any life stage in any situation. And as you can imagine, our services are in demand now more than ever. Work Avenue has already assisted over 2,000 people this year. 1,598 people have been helped with their job search, and 640 businesses have been supported to help them grow. Since March, all our services have been offered online, and we are helping people across the UK and internationally. We offer one-to-one meetings to job seekers and entrepreneurs, giving them the best chance to make a success of their business and to find work. We also offer regular workshops on topics such as creating contemporary and elegant CV, interview skills, and networking. Over 70% of our clients who attend our workshops are successful in securing job interviews. Let me turn to today's conference. Working with clients at all stages of their working life, we are well aware of some of the issues that people can face at the middle to later stages of their working life, and who find themselves seeking their next move, sometimes against their will. Coronavirus has had an impact on all of our lives, and this is especially true in the employment world. Industries have collapsed overnight, and employers have had to make redundancies. You might find yourself looking for a new role in an unfamiliar world at a stage in your life when you thought things were secure. While some of your skills and knowledge may be up to date, some of you may have failed to keep pace with a changing contemporary workplace. You may still have high monthly outgoings and a family to support. Whilst this might be something that many of you can cope with and juggle, we have seen clients facing issues of low confidence and self-esteem, sometimes mental health issues, let alone devastating financial insecurity and knock-on effects for all family members. We hope that today we will address some of these issues and help you to narrow the odds in your favour. I will shortly introduce our keynote speaker, David Kaplan, but before I do, let me briefly run you through the day. Each of you have received a schedule and links for the individual sessions delivered by experts from Work Avenue and from industry. Due to the nature of the virtual sessions, attendance is not capped and you can attend any session you wish. We will convene for a Q&A session with the Work Avenue team, for which you have the link at the end of the conference at 1 p.m. This session is an open forum and we will be addressing questions that you have submitted in advance, together with any others that you may think of during the event in general. I, together with my colleagues, will be acting as co-hosts throughout the sessions, so please do send a message on the chat if you have any questions related to any of the particular sessions that you are in. We'll be shortly launching a poll to understand the demographics of all of you attending today. It's completely anonymous, so as soon as you see the question, please just tick your answer and submit. Wishing you all an enjoyable and thought-provoking conference. And now I turn to our keynote speaker, David Kaplan. Originally from Scotland, David graduated from the University of Glasgow with a degree in both law and history. Following a stint as the first Scottish-born, I have to answer the poll as well.
Sorry.
That's all right. Following the stint as the first Scottish-born chair of the Union of Jewish Students, David moved into the professional Jewish community environment with roles in organizations such as UJIA, Laniado, and the United Synagogue. Upon leaving the United Synagogue after 16 years, David worked hard to change his own career direction and formed his own consultancy firm, providing business coaching to senior execs and advice to family offices regarding governance and succession planning. David, thank you so much for giving up your time to speak to us today. Changing careers is certainly a topic at the forefront of most of our minds right now, and we look forward to hearing from you about your experiences and what advice you can offer others in this position. David.
Thank you, Debbie. I hope everyone can hear me and can understand my Northern Scottish accent. I want to thank, first of all, Emma, Debbie, also Melanie, who'll get a shout out later, and Richard for asking me to start this very innovative, exciting seminar off this morning. It would not be befitting for me to commence without mentioning two things at this stage. First is, obviously, I know you're doing it at 11 o'clock, but Remembrance Day. It's a very moving day. Sadly, I would normally be marching on Sunday, coming with the Ajax, representing the Scotland branch. My great uncle was torpedoed and died at the hand of the Nazis, and many of my family served in the military. So it's very apt you're commemorating that today. And secondly, also linked to my career was the sad passing of Lord Sachs. If not for him, I probably wouldn't have commenced my first careers. And I knew him, I knew him as well as anybody professionally could know Lord Sachs. But he was the chief rabbi when I was fortunate enough to be chairman of the Union of Jewish Students. And it was through him that I managed to change career and change career structure. And I think it'd be befitting me just to mention how much I owe to him and to his teams, professional teams around him, as I probably wouldn't be the Jew I am today if not for Lord Sachs. So more of him a bit later, but who am I? Thank you, Debbie, for introducing me so well. So I'm from Edinburgh. Everyone thinks I'm from Glasgow, and when I say I'm from Edinburgh, people get stumped because they don't know so many Edinburgh people. There might be some Scots and Edinburgh people on this on the Zoom today. There are some, as they say, where I come from, well-kent faces, people who I've worked with on this, people who I still have a relationship with, either professionally or personally. And I hope you're all going to behave yourselves and not ask me too many difficult questions. I actually my first graduation was from a very fine institution, the Edinburgh Jewish Community Cheder. That's where I first learned many skills. I'm very proud to be from Edinburgh, a very small community. I then had the good fortune to go to University of Glasgow, where I discovered for the first time anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. My MP at the time was George Galloway. Many of you will know who that is. And I was chairman of JSOC when he was the MP there. My university was the first one to congratulate Saddam Hussein on Scud missiling Israel. And I had to debate against George Galloway. He then debated with Zionists and Jews, and he then changed his mind a number of years later. It was a very tough university for Jews to be in. Our university and boycotted Israeli goods. And it was a hard ground, but it stood me in good stead for leadership, and I took that on. And I was fortunate enough to become chairman of UJS. That was in 1994 and 1995, so 25 years ago. That year of sabbatical work probably changed my life. I was all set to become a lawyer in Edinburgh. My late mother and father were looking forward to me donning the white wig as an advocate in Edinburgh. But due to the influence of that year and influence of then Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, I changed and I pivoted my career aspirations. And I became, due to him, I became, for the first time, a Jewish community professional. And that was in 1996, when I became the Director of Jewish Continuity in Scotland, which was not linked to Jewish continuity in England. That then merged into becoming the UGIA. And I became the Director of the UGIA in Scotland, responsible for its renewal and educational activities, as well as an element of fundraising. It was great times. I absolutely loved it. And I think we achieved great things. But like anything else, I needed a social life. And those of you who know the Scottish Jewish community, it's quite small. And we're all related to each other. And if we're not related to each other, we're related to other people who are related to each other. I decided to try the bright lights of London. I went for a geographical change, not maybe a career change, but a geographical change. And I made my way to London for a very bizarre role. I became the first professional working for the British Friends of Lanyadoo Hospital, which is a hospital in Netanya in Israel. It's now called Lanyadoo UK. Like everything else, people rebrand themselves. My second interview was in Israel in Yiddish, and very, very difficult for me. I knew a little bit of Scottish Yiddish from my grandparents, but I've never been an interview conducted in Yiddish. So that was very new for me. The hospital was founded by a Holocaust survivor, the Sanz Klausenberger Rebbe, and he survived the Holocaust. Unfortunately, his wife and 11 children did not. And he vowed to build a hospital in Israel. And I became their first fundraising director. That's effectively what it was. I'd never really done full-time fundraising before. I did that in London. And we took the campaign. I did that job for 5 years, for 3 years. We took that campaign from raising about 60 to 70,000 pounds a year to just over 600,000 pounds a year. And I think Lanyadoo today is still very well known. And a lot of the skills I learned at Lanyadoo, I now to practice what I preach, was networking. And that's going to be very much a theme of what I'd be talking about today, in the sense of networking. You don't often know who's in your own network. You don't even know sometimes what people think of you. But certainly with Lanyadoo, it taught me a great lesson that even though you might not believe this, but I'm a little bit of an introvert, not an extrovert. I actually prefer to be behind the screen than up front, but I had to be up front. I had to change. That may seem a bit, counterintuitive due to my leadership roles in the Jewish student world, but I took them on because I recognized that very few Jewish students were actually standing up and being counted. I remember going to an event at Glasgow University where the talk was about Israel, the Nazi state, and it was equating modern day Israel with Sheldon, the days of Nazi Germany. And they were trying to equate the modern day Zionists to the SS stormtroopers. And I saw behind me many Jewish students who I knew had been through many youth movements and many leadership programs, sitting on their hands, doing nothing, saying nothing. And there was me from Edinburgh, I went to a non-Jewish school. I was only Jew in my school. And yet I was prepared to stand up and be counted and do something different. And that's what I did. And at that moment, I realized that I had to do something. I had to do something to change me, because I wasn't naturally going to do that. But I couldn't sit by and just watch everything else, all the other Jewish students sit on their hands. So Lanyadoo was an amazing experience for me. So it forced me out. It forced me out to meet people. It forced me out around the country. It forced me out of my comfort zone. And that was a tremendous shot in the arm for who I was and my self-confidence. I was then fortunate enough after that to be headhunted by, believe it or not again, Jonathan Sacks. He and Peter Sheldon and Rabbi Sol Znaimer were running the United Synagogue, and they came to me to say, would I help bring a new youth initiative with a former colleague of mine, then Andrew Shaw, Rabbi Andrew Shaw, to revolutionize the young people within United Synagogue framework. I'd worked with Andrew. He was my deputy when I was UGS chair. He was the other sabbatical officer, and he created a marvelous program then called 50 Days for 50 Years, which many of you know may have morphed into 60 Days for 60 Years and 70 Days for 70 Years. That was us all those years ago with the late Sir Martin Gilbert, launching 50 Days for 50 Years with Jewish students all around the world. We launched a thing called Tribe. Love it or hate it, Tribe was a remarkable achievement for the United Synagogue. It had never done anything like that before. And we look back on that, with great pride. We started with nothing, really nothing. We had no database, we had no Facebook and LinkedIn, any of these things. We had to do the old school, go around people, speak to people, sign people up. It was an amazing thing that we tried to do. And it is still living today. It's very different to what myself and Andrew created. I hope it's still doing wonderful things. But it was again a leadership role within the Jewish community, which I was very comfortable in. I was very safe in, and I felt it was good. Yes, it was challenging. Politics and Jewish community leadership is never easy, particularly when you're dealing with trustees and chief rabbis and dayanim and shul rabbis. It's a recipe of complexity, and it's all-consuming. I didn't realize how all-consuming it was until I left it, but more to that later on. I then was fortunate enough to be promoted to be a director of United Synagogue, and in that role, many of you will have come across me who are on this call. I recognize some of the faces and the names. I was responsible for a number of things for 10 years. I was responsible for United Synagogue burial. The burial grounds at Bushey were part of my portfolio. I worked very closely with the current head of burial, Melvin Hartog, but I was a director responsible for US burial, for the Willesden project, which is coming up at the moment, the regeneration of Willesden in the historical context. Interestingly, I was also responsible for rabbinic recruitment. So I've got a recruitment hat on as well. I was responsible for community buildings and development, marriage, silver, the treasures, and a very, very wide, very wide scope. And it was absolutely magnificent. I loved every minute at United Synagogue, and I wouldn't change it for anything. One of the things I've learned is that even when things aren't as good somewhere and you know that you're coming to a natural conclusion, when you're going out into the workplace, one of the lessons I learned from one of my networking calls is never talk badly about your former bosses or your former employees, because you never ever know where it's going to come back to you. And there are so many people that I've worked with and met over the past couple of years who all they still want to talk to me about is the United Synagogue. And it's always about their shul, the burial, this rabbi, that rabbi. And you know what? It's wonderful in a way, but I never talk badly because you just never know. And I don't want to talk badly because without them, I wouldn't be who I am today. They gave me that leadership challenge. They gave me that ability to take on major complex issues. And they gave me the ability to really help shape what I believe was a good Jewish future at the time. So I spent 16 years there. They were great times, but I hit my ceiling. I probably got as far as I was going to go. And a lot of people at the time were telling me, probably a couple of years before I actually left, you've got to move on. You've got to move on. You've got to take another route. You can't be there till you're 60. It's not good enough. You've got to try other things, other skills. You'll just become, you'll look around there and you'll just see people who literally they've got nothing else. They can't give any more. They've hit their ceiling, their Peter principle. That's a phrase I learned a lot recently, hitting your Peter principle. So there were great times, but I had to take a leap of faith and I had to move out and primarily move out of the Jewish world, which was my comfort zone. And to be honest with you, my wife wasn't particularly pleased about that. We've got a mortgage to pay. We had bills to pay, responsibilities. She wanted a loft at the time. That was great. I had to tell her, no, these are the first world problems, but I've got to restart and reposition myself because otherwise I'm just going to look back and go, what else? I was very comfortable, perhaps too comfortable. It was a risk. It was a very big risk. And the other thing which, again, many people challenged me over was well, you might be able to move into the non-Jewish world, but you won't do very well because your skill set is not compatible with how the non-Jewish world is today. You've been a very, very closeted world in the Jewish community, and out there is big, bad, and hard. And that wasn't easy to me to think about. There were also knockbacks. You know, in my brain, I was no longer going to get a monthly salary, my pension, a car parking space, which I'd very much treasured for many years. All these things were going to go, and it was very, very daunting. I must say, there's two people, they're both in this call today, who gave me a bit of a lifeline. One of my first calls when I decided to move into this world was Melanie Pearl, and Melanie's on here. And Melanie, who I knew from her days, her former role in the United Synagogue, was somebody I could trust, somebody who I could have confidence in, and somebody who knew me as well, and would tell me straight between the eyes if I was completely off the mark or whether I was actually potentially could make a success. We spent a good few hours together. I hadn't ever done my CV since I applied for a job with Lanyado in the year 1999. So it was about 20 years out of date, literally. And she pulled me apart, took me through things, who I was, what I was trying to do. And she absolutely nailed my CV and got me in a direction of positivity. Because at that point, I was a little bit struggling as to how I was actually who was going to pay me money. That was the thing. Who was actually going to pay me some money to actually work for them? The other person on this call is a guy called Austin. Austin and I went back a number of years, probably about 25 years. And I decided to do some volunteering, to go into another workplace. I asked Austin if I could volunteer in his section of a Jewish community organization. And he said yes. And I went in 2-3 days a week just to see another workplace, be another face, not be leading, just to get out there and do something, even when I was looking for another job. I was there for maybe about 2 months. And I think that for my mental health, it was one of the best things that I did. Just to be around people who didn't know my past, didn't know what I'd previously done. I was photocopying, I was filing, I was archiving, things which I just hadn't done since I was 18 or 19. But you know what? It was absolutely magnificent. So to those people, I owe a great debt. I didn't also realize about social media and LinkedIn and things like that. I'd not had a LinkedIn profile. I hadn't ever engaged in it. I hadn't ever thought I needed to. One of the things I've learned very quickly is that I needed to upskill myself and upgrade myself in being able to make sure that I was in a good place if people wanted to offer me a job. I realized very soon that after I met anybody or before I met anybody, they looked me up on LinkedIn. They didn't look me up on Facebook, but they all looked me up on LinkedIn. And if I had a schwach profile, a poor profile, something that was a bit asher nebuch, then they all thought I'd be a bit nebuch. Do you know what? You don't have, I don't spend a great deal of time in it, but I just asked somebody what I should do. And they spent about half an hour and said, you need to do this, you need to do that. And you know what? I still haven't touched my LinkedIn profile greatly, but it means that I'm confident when people look me up. And by goodness, people look me up. And I look them up. And it's all part of the fun and all part of the fun. But there's a serious side to it. And the serious side is that is the place where people who are looking to employ you, looking to bring you on as a contractor, will initially look you up. Facebook was so last year when it comes to this type of stuff. And I don't engage with Facebook particularly, or Insta. But certainly on a professional level, having a proper profile, somebody looking at it, somebody questioning it and pushing you on it, I think is very important to do. Whether you want to have your own business, whether you're in a business looking for work, I think that's very important. I talked about networking earlier on, and again, I had to push myself. Now it's very different in this environment, so I apologize because my experiences were mainly with coffees in the Hendon Hall Hotel, Oliver Sholem, and various other places around North London. I tended to go to hotels, by the way. I hated the sort of the Orleys of this world. I tended to go to various hotels around the M25 where I could sit all day with one coffee. No, I sat for about 4 or 5 hours and had 3 or 4 different appointments, meeting people. And people who, some of them sort of came kicking and screaming because they felt they had to, some because they wanted to. But bizarrely, and I couldn't quite believe this, nearly everybody I met gave of their time willingly, was really pleased to help, and actually wanted to see you succeed. It was through one of those coffee meetings, and I must have had about 50 to 60 coffee meetings. And there's a chap called Mark Curtis, he probably who's doing 500 coffees in Israel at the moment, and he's doing that, and he's sort of taking pictures of himself, everybody taking coffee. It's a serious bit. I mean, having Zoom coffees maybe isn't quite the same, but please God, in the spring that may change, or with a reduction in lockdown. But go and find people to have coffee with. It really is, even if you don't know them well, get some, because that's what LinkedIn was for, and I found it amazing. It was through one of those coffees that somebody came up to me about 2 weeks later, and the meeting I thought was pretty hopeless, actually. They came up to me and went, "There's somebody I think I want you to meet." I was like, okay. And through that, I managed to get a client, my first client. And it took me, quite a long time to get that first client. I must say I was applying for other jobs as well at the same time as looking at building my own consultancy, because you can't put all your eggs in one basket. But I found that in that particular time, the jobs that I was going for, it was one of hundreds. And I struggled to get interviews. I got about 3 or 4 interviews, and then I struggled from there on. I then focused very much on the networking and building my consultancy. But I got a lot of knockbacks as well. I thought I'd had great meetings, nothing came of it. I thought I had great coffees, nothing came of it. With people who I thought, oh yeah, they'll really help me, But sometimes it comes from the most bizarre of places. And I have found that very, very much, that the people who really want to help you are people like me who've been in those positions who want to help others. There's people on this call today who I saw earlier on who I've been helping in a way as well. And you know what? It's an amazing community. And actually Zoom and these type of things have actually helped that, because you can actually get to people. People are at their computers, they're at their desks. You don't have to go through their PAs and their international journeys to find. They're actually delighted to meet with somebody because they don't actually have the same interactions that they used to have. So for me, the other great thing for me about building my consultancy, and my major client is SBC Group. I'm the COO of this group called SBC, which Debbie alluded to, which is 2 wings in it. It's a business coaching division, and for CEOs in the city and in high-tech startups, but also magnificently in the world of family offices and family businesses, which is a whole different world for me. These are people of net worth of about 100 million or more who've got tremendous challenges in their lives and their children, lots of challenges with addictions and problems in their family because of too much money and too much responsibility. You might think, well, that's a terrible thing and, oh, we should all have that. But many of these people give great charity. Most of my clients are in the non-Jewish world, and they give big charity donations to many foundations and organizations that we all cherish. So we have to keep them going and keep them motivated in order to understand the responsibility of giving of their time and giving of money as well. One of the things I would say as well that I think is very important at this stage, I have had to really upskill myself, and it all links back to being in the safe Jewish organization, is that I didn't really have the pressure to upskill myself in very many things. I've been forced into social media platforms. I've been forced into learning what Slack is, what Microsoft Teams is, Google Docs, Google Business Suite. We never had to deal with that at all where I was. We didn't have to. That wasn't a pressure. I would say that one of those things, if you're looking, is, and I've spoken to a few people who are on this call, who are looking for certain roles, you have to be comfortable in those environments now. We're not going to go back to the way it was. Monday.com, Trello, Slack, Teams, Google Suite. These are things you've got to become accustomed to. Otherwise, you're going to struggle in the new modern workplace. I'm still learning, but it's something I've had to really focus on in order that I make myself relevant to my clients and to future clients. I would say this, wouldn't I? But I would also say, find yourself a coach or a mentor. I think it's very, very important to do that. I've got one. There is a difference between a coach and a mentor. A coach, obviously, is somebody who pushes you. Roger Federer has a coach, even though he's the greatest tennis player of our era, one of them. but he's still got a coach to help him and to inspire him and just give him that edge and to challenge him. Whereas a mentor is somebody who maybe has done it before, seen it, and can just give general advice. But I would say find a coach and a mentor. I'm not sure about Work Avenue, what they do in that field, but I'm sure they have ideas, and I'm sure that is what they also provide. But it's been one of the things that's been very helpful for me, and I would advise you as well. It is worth doing. Money could be an object, and I appreciate that, but having a mentor is, if not a professional coach, is something I would really say that would be very beneficial. The other thing, which just as I come to conclude, and I'm very happy to take some questions via Emma in the chat box if there are some, is that again in my old life in the United Synagogue where I changed, it was all consuming. My life was all consuming Jewish community, Jewish. I moved into this different world and I've got a different work-life balance. Yes, I still work hard, but I now be able to see my family more, not just because of lockdown, but because there are boundaries. Whereas the boundaries were a bit more blurred in the Jewish community. There were boundaries of work, boundaries of expectation. And I feel that for myself, I almost felt liberated from that world. It took me a while to understand that. And not in any way am I criticizing that world, because without that, I wouldn't have had the network and the contacts and the enjoyment I had. But I didn't realize how all-consuming it was for me at the time. I just thought it was normal. I'm not saying I go to bed now at 9 o'clock and watch Netflix for 3 hours. I still work very, very hard. I'd still talk to clients at 10, 11 o'clock at night. But for some reason, it's not all as consuming. So what I would say in conclusion is network. Even though it might not be your comfort zone, Zoom helps with that if it's not your comfort zone. I'm an introvert who's had to become a bit of an extrovert in order to do this. I've been fortunate, my networks were strong and good, but actually the clients I've got and the networks I've got from what I've done were from people actually who I didn't get on with very well for many years, but because we were professional, I never talked badly about my former bosses or my former organizations, not that I would anyway, but sometimes you slip, sometimes you think, oh, that's what they want to hear. You don't do that. You want to be positive, upbeat, even when you get the knocks. And believe me, I got the knocks as well, where I thought I was going to really conquer the world, but I didn't. And I'm very, very happy at the life choice I made, decision I made, and I'm very grateful for the people, my coaches, my mentors who took me on that journey. I hope that this has been helpful. I hope you have felt that it's been positive. And I just want to again congratulate Work Avenue on everything that they're doing, and to thank those who are on this call who've helped get me where I am. You know who you are. I've put a shout out for a few of you already. I'm expecting a bottle of whiskey for Hanukkah from each of you. And very much, I hope that you've enjoyed what I've had to say. And I'm very happy to take, I think there's another 5 or 6 minutes left of this session. If there are any particular questions which I'm able to talk about, I will do so. Thank you once again for your time, and all success for you and for the rest of the seminar.
David, thank you. That was wonderful. That was absolutely I found that so inspiring. I hope I speak for everyone. I'm sure I speak for everyone. Your own personal journey has been tremendous, actually, not in a straight line. So many of us will have had careers that don't necessarily go in a straight line. They twist, they turn, they go up a few blind alleys, they reverse themselves, they go back forward again. But your testimony to the fact that you kept on going and you found a new way. Certain aspects of what you said really struck a nerve with me. That the first point of that was networking. You're so right. We also endorse that so strongly. In fact, we will be having a session about it later. Many of you have registered for that particular session. So thank you for the prompt on that. The second was about reskilling and upskilling, and that's also something that we talk about quite a lot through this session, and also when we meet with clients at Work Avenue. I asked for questions on the chat, and one or two have put some lovely comments thanking you for everything that you've done, which is great. I have a question on the chat, which many of you can see, from Mark Morris. And Mark has asked, with hindsight, what would you have done different at the US and previous jobs to plan for the future in building your long-term career without being too obvious about what you were doing? Hindsight it can be a wonderful thing, can't it?
Yeah, it's good. That's a good question, Mark. I wasn't actually thinking about my future career when I was at the United Synagogue. When I was at Lanyado, I certainly was. I knew there was a finite time that I could do for that. I knew I didn't want to be a fundraiser permanently, because I saw that when people walked into a room after being 20 years a fundraiser, people walked away. I didn't want to be one of those people. So I was certainly then looking for my next role. And that's why, for example, I was approached, because people knew I was only going to do that for a finite period of time. At the US, though, Mark, I wasn't looking for that new role until about a couple of years before I left, when it became obvious to me I hit my ceiling. And at that point, actually, I started to look at various things. I actually subscribed to a thing called Third Sector, which was a magazine which is now online about jobs in the third sector. I never thought of going to the corporate sector. I always thought my comfort zone would be in the charitable world in the third sector. So I subscribed to Third Sector. I'd recommend that to most people here as well. It's really good. And I would say, with hindsight, I think if I'd been too obvious, it wouldn't have worked for me. I think my work ratio would have gone down. I think I needed to be as passionate as I was throughout. But what is very clear was I didn't have a coach and a mentor at that time in the same way, looking at my career, Mark. And that's something, with hindsight, I would say I made a mistake on. I had a mentor for the Jewish community stuff I spoke to, but I didn't have a coach to help upskill me. So with hindsight, now knowing what I know, I didn't know that then. So it wasn't that I deliberately avoided it. I just didn't know. And I think that on hindsight would be the single most thing that I would think with hindsight I should have had as a personal development coach of some type.
Thank you for that, David. There are a couple more questions, one in particular that I would like to ask from Jackie. And she asks, what is the Peter Principle? Is it, but is it related to Murphy's Law?
Okay, so
very good question, Jackie.
Okay, so the Peter Principle is a book I came across in the last couple of years, written by an American professor in the 1960s, mainly taking the mickey out of the American military system, the military promotion system. The Peter Principle basically says that you get promoted to the level of your own incompetence, and it's very striking in many organizations. Particularly, I'm not saying in the Jewish world, particularly in the charitable world, where people just stay in the organization for many, many years, and they keep on going up and they keep on getting promoted because there's nowhere else for them to go. But they actually haven't had the training and the experience and the ability to do so. And it's something that I pride myself in the work that I do. It's helping organizations and people avoid that Peter Principle by continually developing and upskilling themselves, so they don't just get frozen and then get frustrated. I'd recommend it. It's about £3 on Amazon. I'd highly recommend it. It's very funny, and you can replace the names there for people that you know in your own networks. But it's about you avoiding your own Peter Principle.
Thank you. I think we've all, if we've only learned that this morning, which we haven't, we've learned so much more. That's a really interesting point. So thank you very much. Now, we have a couple more minutes, and there are a few questions on the chat all about networking. I'm cognizant of the fact that we do have a networking session, but a couple of people have just asked about networking and LinkedIn in particular.
Right.
Couple of top tips from you, David, to close about how to make your profile appealing so others find it authentic and want to engage with you.
So first of all, it's about building your connections. You've got to have a very good photograph. If you dodge that, then people will think you're not credible, and that's sometimes very uncomfortable for people, and I appreciate that. You also have to have a good title, and don't have too much in there. Otherwise, you're not writing a thesis in your first thing. That algorithm that picks it up at the beginning is very important. And then really working on trying to get to about 500 connections. Once you get to about 500 connections, then the algorithms in LinkedIn click in. And what I would say is, it's a bit of a cheat this, but find things and find people that do a lot of LinkedIn activity and share their things. So if you're interested in entrepreneurship, in banking, in charity, find one of your contacts who does that and share some of their articles on your feed. Because when people look you up, they see what your interests are, even if you don't have the ability to do it yourself. I'm rubbish at it, but I pull on others because it then shows what I'm interested in, and it shows what, and when people look, it's what people, when they look you up, think, oh yeah, he's following so and so. Oh, that's interesting. So those would be my top tips.
Sadly, we have run out of time. David, that was wonderful. I am absolutely certain I speak for everybody on this on this session this morning. That was the most magnificent introduction to our event this morning. It encapsulated absolutely everything that we are working on, that we are thinking about, and that we are going to endorse through other sessions throughout the morning. And you didn't even know that. So that's even better from your part. So I simply want to thank you on behalf of Work Avenue and on behalf of everyone who is on this session this morning for something that is so interesting, so thought-provoking. I've been on the edge of my seat throughout. I'm sure everyone else has been as well. Thank you for your time this morning, and thank you for introducing our session so well, setting the tone for the rest of defining your second career. It's now 10 o'clock. Thank you, David. It's now 10 o'clock. We take a 5-minute comfort break, coffee break, catch your breath break, whatever it is, before we pick up on the next Zoom. Everyone on the call today has their schedule and knows what the 2 next sessions are. You can either join Melanie Pearl, who's going to tell us all about changing sector using your transferable skills, or you can join Amanda Rubin from Bijou Recruitment, a fantastic recruitment consultant, who's actually going to dispel some myths and actually tell us how to get the best and how to work with recruitment agencies. Both absolutely critical for our time. So I thank you all for your time. Let's take a 5-minute break. It's going to be a fresh link, and I'll see you on one or other of the next sessions. Many thanks. All the best. Bye-bye.